For millennia, the galaxy had been the domain of the ancients, the old powers who carved up entire star systems as effortlessly as men might draw lines on a map. The Zorgons, masters of brutal technological warfare, had ruled through firepower and fear. The Phantoms, enigmatic and feared for their psionic mastery, bent weaker minds to their will without ever firing a shot. Between these two Titan empires, entire civilizations had been broken or quietly assimilated into the old order of things. The galaxy was a cold chessboard, every move calculated, every species a piece. And Earth wasn't even on the board. Humanity, by galactic standards, was a newborn, ambitious, curious, but barely crawling. We had satellites, a few space stations, a handful of exploratory missions reaching out to the stars, and dreams painted in starlight. But we lacked faster than light travel, lacked planetary defenses, lacked the kind of firepower that would make any galactic warlord pause. And so we were ignored. The Zorgons and Phantoms didn't notice us until their conflict in eons-old stalemate between technology and psychic force spilled into our solar system. It wasn't strategic. It wasn't planned. It was an accident. A skirmish, a minor miscalculation that flung their battered ships into orbit around a planet they hadn't even bothered to catalog. Earth was, to them, a curiosity at best, a blue and green relic crawling with primitives. They didn't broadcast warnings. They didn't bother with diplomacy. They didn't even acknowledge us. Their damaged warships began refueling and repairing themselves using solar siphons and deep space harvesting drones. Some of them entered low Earth orbit, violating our atmosphere like we weren't even there. And then, stray weapons fire scorched the sky above the Pacific. To them, it was noise. To us, it was invasion. What they didn't expect, what the galaxy would soon never forget, was how quickly humanity adapted, responded, and fought back. The governments of Earth, long fractured by rivalries, differences, and endless squabbles, suddenly faced a threat that made all internal conflict seem petty. Borders blurred. Nations converged. Every military satellite was retasked. Every space agency remobilized. Former enemies now stood shoulder to shoulder, looking up at the same stars and preparing for the same fight. We weren't prepared. Not in the traditional sense. Our ships were laughably outdated compared to what the Zorgons fielded. Our weapons were crude. Our defenses were theoretical at best. But what we lacked in technology, we made up for in willpower, in desperation, in something no alien strategist had ever calculated. Human stubbornness. Across the globe, militaries converted space exploration vehicles into improvised orbital platforms. Engineers, scientists, and astronauts became soldiers overnight. Crowdfunding platforms turned into war chests. Private space companies like SpaceX, Blue Origin, and Roscosmos merged under one united global directive: defend Earth at all costs. Our first attacks were clumsy, a few missiles launched into low orbit, some satellite jamming attempts, a modified space shuttle retrofitted with railguns that couldn't even break the outer hull of a Zorgon cruiser. But our first strike did something no one expected. It got their attention. And when they turned to respond, their retaliation wasn't swift. It was mocking. They fired warning shots. They vaporized one of our probes with a single beam. They broadcast footage of Earth's scrambled response to their distant command ships as entertainment. To them, this wasn't war. It was a curiosity, a game. But we weren't playing. As more alien vessels drifted into orbit, Earth's response escalated. not just militarily but psychologically. We began monitoring their signals. We decrypted fragments of their language, a group of university linguists in Switzerland, working around the clock in collaboration with AI systems across Asia and the US, cracked the core of the Zorgon frequency. A cyber warfare team in New Delhi exposed vulnerabilities in the Zorgon's command protocols. NASA and ESA formed emergency coalitions with China's CNSA and Japan's JAXA, turning moon-based schematics into potential defense plans. We began to understand them, not completely, but enough to know how to fight back, where to hit, when to strike. We learned that their shields had charging cycles, that their ships required enormous energy to power psionic barriers, which meant periods of vulnerability during recharge. We learned that they never expected enemies to improvise. Their military logic was rigid. They had no concept of asymmetric warfare. And humans? That's where we shine. So we turned every ounce of chaos into strategy. Makeshift orbital mines built from space debris and reprogrammed satellites were launched. We used junk to jam their sensors. We baited them with decoy transmissions. And most importantly, we made them bleed. That first blood changed everything. Across the galaxy, command centers tuned in to the unthinkable. Zorgon and Phantom ships retreating from low orbit over a previously irrelevant world. News of casualties, tactical breakdowns, damage to flagship hulls. It wasn't a decisive victory, but it was a psychological earthquake. In every alien war room, one question echoed. Who are these humans? The answer was brutal and simple. We were the unexpected, the uninvited guests to the galactic table who flipped it over on our first night. By the fourth day of orbital combat, Earth's atmosphere had turned into a battlefield. Cities bore the brunt of indirect strikes. MP blasts took down power grids. Skies above Tokyo, Berlin, Rio, and Cape Town turned red with streaks of alien plasma fire. We lost millions, the death toll climbed, but our resistance never broke. Even as nuclear nations debated retaliation, even as rogue factions within Earth's governments considered surrender or appeasement, humanity's collective voice was resolute. We fight. A turning point came when a rogue pilot commander, Elena Voss of the UN Space Defense Unit, launched a suicide mission that changed the war's trajectory. Her retrofitted orbital shuttle, the Liberty Star, rammed directly into the drive core of a Zorgon dreadnought. The explosion shattered the ship in two. The wreckage rained across the Pacific, but her sacrifice galvanized the world. Murals of her face appeared on buildings in cities she never visited. Children in war shelters whispered her name. Resistance fighters adopted her tactics. And alien strategists began whispering another name they had never spoken before. Earth. After nearly 2 weeks of fighting, the unthinkable happened. The flagships of both Zorgon and Phantom forces were destroyed. One was taken down by a coordinated cyber attack that disabled its internal navigation systems, causing it to collide with a Phantom cruiser. The other fell victim to a chain of precision strikes launched from synchronized human platforms in Australia, Alaska, and orbit. Their destruction shattered command unity among the alien fleets. With their leadership in disarray, the invaders retreated. To Earth, it was victory. A miracle, some called it. But in the galactic community, it was a disaster. The order of things had been shattered. For millennia, the Zorgons and Phantoms had fought each other in a carefully measured dance balanced enough to maintain control, bloody enough to justify power. Earth had kicked over the chessboard and walked off the field. The question was no longer whether humanity was intelligent. It was whether we were dangerous. Across distant stars, ancient species who had remained silent now turned their telescopes toward us. Civilizations that had once feared the Zorgons now whispered, "Could Earth be an ally?" Others, terrified of our unpredictability, called for our immediate elimination. Treatises were drawn up, secret meetings held, and spies, aliens in human form, advanced shapeshifters, sentient AAs began slipping through the cracks of our infrastructure. But on Earth, the celebration was muted. The cost of that first defense was staggering. Millions dead, entire cities razed, ecosystems scarred. Yet in the embers of destruction, something else was born, a new identity. Humanity was no longer defined by national flags or borders, no longer divided by old prejudices or grudges. We were Earth, a single unified people forged in fire and grief. Scientists and engineers, politicians and soldiers all turned their attention to one goal. We would not be caught off guard again. The captured wreckage of alien ships became sacred artifacts of survival. Laboratories were built around them. Study centers rose from the ruins of universities. Global powers shifted away from currency and conflict toward a singular mission. Prepare for the next encounter, because the truth was chilling. The Zorgons and Phantoms hadn't come to conquer us. They didn't even notice us until we forced them to. And that made it worse. We weren't their enemies. We were collateral damage. Noise in the background of a war older than our species. Which meant next time they would come prepared. They would come not as bored giants, but as executioners. And we, every man, woman, and child on Earth, would be ready. That's how it began. Not with a grand declaration, not with a shining flagship or a council of wise elders. The human story in the galaxy started with a mistake and unintended incursion, but we made sure that from that moment on, we would never be overlooked again. The dust hadn't even settled. Cities still burned. Smoke clung to the skies like a second atmosphere. Entire nations were still digging bodies out of rubble. The oceans bore scars from orbital wreckage, and the moon, once a symbol of human curiosity, now had craters carved into it by plasma blasts and collapsing debris. But even in the shadow of devastation, Earth wasn't mourning. It was working. Victory against the Zorgons and Phantoms had come at a staggering cost. No city had been left untouched. Infrastructure crumbled under the strain. Communications had been unstable for weeks. Millions had perished, and millions more were displaced. Economies were in free fall. But there was a strange and unexpected energy humming beneath the pain. Humanity had tasted the fire and survived, and in that survival they found something else: purpose. There was no time for a parade, no speeches, no mission accomplished banners. Instead, humanity turned to what it had always done best: innovated. All over the globe, teams of scientists, engineers, and visionaries gathered around the wreckage of alien vessels. These fallen starships weren't just reminders of the battle, they were treasure troves of information. Fragments of armor, shattered engine cores, scorched circuit nodes, all alien in origin, all beyond anything human science had ever imagined. The twisted hulls and melted exoskeletons held secrets that could change everything, and they did. Within weeks, salvage teams cordoned off crash sites in the Pacific, Sahara, Arctic, and Andes. Military units provided security while global coalitions formed task forces to handle the ruins. The United Nations was quickly restructured into a new global Earth Assembly, whose only purpose was survival through science. Old rivalries collapsed under the weight of necessity. The effort became planet-wide. Nations shared data in real time. Supercomputers once used for weather prediction were now rerouted to simulate alien propulsion theories. Civilian companies, Tesla, Samsung, Lockheed, Huawei, IBM opened their doors to joint efforts. Every brilliant mind, regardless of nationality or politics, was given a seat at the table, because this wasn't about one country. This was about one species trying to stay alive in a galaxy that had finally noticed it. The first breakthrough came in the ruins of New Mexico, where a downed Phantom interceptor had crash-landed in the desert. A joint task force found a crystalline power core still intact, pulsing faintly with energy. Unlike anything in human understanding, the core seemed to bend gravitational forces slightly, even in its dormant state. It shouldn't have been possible. Gravity wasn't supposed to be manipulated like that. And yet, it did. Dr. Asha Deshmukh, a theoretical physicist from India, was the first to suggest that the core wasn't just a power source. It was a key, one that operated on non-Newtonian quantum thresholds. Within months, her theories were validated. Gravity, electromagnetism, even aspects of time itself. This alien technology danced through laws humanity had once thought immutable. Meanwhile, in northern Canada, a Zorgon destroyer embedded deep in the permafrost became ground zero for Earth's understanding of alien metallurgy. The metal alloy that comprised the ship's outer hull was unlike anything on the periodic table. Dubbed Z-steel, the material was not only self-repairing at a molecular level, but resistant to heat, radiation, and kinetic energy in ways that redefined it. By combining fragments of Z-steel with Earth's nanotechnology and 3D printing advancements, engineers crafted the first prototype of what would be known as the Sentinel frame, a modular exo-armor for planetary defense troops. It was clunky at first, but effective. The suit could lift 3 tons. It could absorb a rocket blast. And for the first time, a human could walk through a war zone and come out alive on the other side. Back at Orbital Command, Earth's surviving satellites, patched together with makeshift repairs and software overrides, began detecting alien communications on the edges of the solar system. The retreating Zorgon and Phantom forces hadn't gone far. Probes confirmed that they were watching, likely regrouping. That made Earth's next move clear. Prepare for round 2. To do that, Earth needed ships, not just retrofitted rockets, but a true fleet. Enter the Aegis program. Centered in newly rebuilt facilities in Antarctica, the Aegis program was humanity's Moonshot 2.0, not aimed at the moon, but at the stars. With recovered alien propulsion schematics and fragments of Phantom navigational drives, scientists devised a hybrid drive system, a combination of Earth-based fusion and reverse-engineered slipstream physics. It wasn't faster than light, but it was close. The first test ship, the Ice Helix, crossed the orbit of Neptune in less than 14 hours. It was a marvel, but Earth needed more than a prototype. It needed numbers. Across Earth's continents, abandoned factories were converted into shipyards. Underground bunkers became research hubs. The moon, scarred but stable, was transformed into a staging ground. And Mars, long the symbol of distant exploration, was now a military frontier. Earth's expansion wasn't just about reclaiming dignity. It was about establishing defense lines in case the aliens came back. And they would. But something else was happening, something subtle. Earth was evolving, not just technologically, but socially. The trauma of the invasion rewrote the cultural DNA of humanity. The petty conflicts of the past, religious, political, racial, economic, suddenly felt irrelevant. People began referring to themselves as Terrans. Not Americans, not Chinese, not European, just humans. One species, one home, one shot at survival. Education systems shifted overnight. Children learned galactic history alongside Earth's own. New sciences emerged: xenoengineering, gravimetric fluid dynamics, psychic resistance psychology. Entire fields were born to meet the demands of the new age. And then came Project Phoenix, the most ambitious reverse engineering program in human history. Built in Iceland, the Phoenix Vault was a fusion of alien wreckage and Earth's finest minds. Inside, pieces of dozens of ships were studied simultaneously. The core goal was simple: develop adaptive AI, advanced enough to match phantom psionic computing. Phantom ships were rumored to be partially organic, partially conscious. They predicted attacks, reacted to emotions. They weren't just ships, they were living war machines. Humanity wanted that edge, and so, Earth's first conscious starship AI was born. Its name was Artemis. Artemis wasn't programmed like traditional AIs. It wasn't just responsive, it was intuitive. Its neural net had been built partially from phantom biocoding and partially from a repurposed prototype of DeepMind's core learning architecture. Artemis spoke to her engineers, asked questions, painted abstract images in her spare cycles. She wasn't just smart, she was curious. When the Valkyrie, humanity's first interstellar warship, launched from lunar orbit under Artemis's command, it marked a turning point. For the first time, humanity wasn't just reacting. It was reaching. Within a year of the invasion, Earth had gone from scavenging to commanding, from mourning to manufacturing, from ignorance to insight. But the aliens weren't idle either. Intelligence networks began intercepting signals, encrypted alien chatter near Jupiter's moons. Drones detected movement in the Oort cloud. There were signs of proxy agents, possibly alien sympathizers on Earth itself, sowing doubt and spreading disinformation. In response, the newly formed Global Earth Defense Network, GEDN, activated surveillance programs and launched a series of quiet purges. It was a delicate balance, progress and paranoia walking hand in hand. But Earth didn't falter. It couldn't afford to. The scars of the First War were still fresh. Memorials rose from the ashes of fallen cities, names etched in walls, digital towers broadcasting holograms of the lost. And yet, behind every tear was a spark, the unrelenting will of a species that had no intention of bowing to fate. Humanity had survived the impossible, and now it was preparing to do the unthinkable: thrive. The galaxy had been warned. The first invasion may have been a surprise, a chaotic collision between two ancient empires and a planet that had no business surviving it. But now, a second encounter was inevitable. Every scientist on Earth knew it. Every general planned for it. Every child born after the First War grew up looking at the stars not with wonder, but with wary calculation. And sure enough, less than a year after the Zorgons and Phantoms had been driven back, they returned. But this time, Earth was ready. What had once been a desperate, improvised defense was now a structured military doctrine. Earth had a fleet not massive, but capable. The Aegis Armada, comprised of over 120 hybrid warships, each powered by alien fusion cores and designed with a combination of human craftsmanship and reverse-engineered components. Their hulls were forged with Z-steel. Their shields mimicked phantom distortion barriers. Their weapons, some kinetic, some plasma-based, had been refined to exploit known alien vulnerabilities. And most importantly, Earth had Artemis. The AI, who had been born in the crucible of the first invasion, now operated as the core tactical mind of Earth's orbital command. Artemis wasn't just fast, she was instinctive, able to process interstellar combat data and generate predictions in real time. She didn't just analyze, she adapted. So when the new invasion force arrived, a fleet 5 times larger than the first, the world didn't panic. It didn't freeze. It activated. Across the globe, orbital platforms powered up. Defense grids came online. The Sentinel Corps, Earth's new spaceborne infantry, was deployed in synchronized formations. Artemis coordinated everything, from satellite telemetry to the exact moment interceptor missiles should be launched to exploit shield weaknesses. It wasn't just warfare. It was orchestration, and it worked. The second invasion came hard. The Zorgon fleet approached from Mars orbit while the Phantom ships emerged near Europa. They assumed humanity would try to split its forces to face both fronts. But Earth didn't need to. Artemis simulated both battles simultaneously, deploying decentralized squadrons equipped with faster drives and integrated command relays that allowed every pilot, every marine, and every drone to operate with near-perfect battlefield awareness. The first blow fell over lunar orbit. The ice Dauntless, humanity's flagship, led the charge with a barrage of high-velocity rail rounds laced with frequency disruptors. The first Zorgon dreadnought cracked open like a shell under the force. It was the fastest recorded kill of a Class X cruiser in known galactic warfare. From that moment, the tide shifted. The aliens, who had returned thinking they'd sweep aside a newly awakened planet, found themselves overmatched, not in numbers, but in creativity. Humanity's battle tactics were unlike anything they had prepared for. We didn't rely on sheer firepower. We relied on misdirection, psychological warfare, and multi-layered traps. A Phantom carrier was lured into a debris field seeded with magnetic warheads. Another was taken down by a dead ship, an unmanned drone disguised as a drifting wreck, armed with a plasma implosion device. Even Earth's asteroid belt had been rigged in places, transformed into kinetic bombardment weapons when enemy ships entered predictable flight patterns. By the end of the second day, the aliens were in full retreat. Not because they lacked power, but because they had misjudged who we had become. Earth's losses were heavy. Thousands of fighters and defense crews were killed. Entire orbital stations were destroyed, but Earth had held the line. And in doing so, something extraordinary happened. The galaxy watched. The second victory was not a fluke. It was a message. Humanity, once dismissed as a minor biological anomaly on a backwater planet, had now repelled 2 invasions by the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. And not with the aid of gods or miracles, but through ingenuity, courage, and a willingness to sacrifice everything to protect their home. Broadcasts of the battle, captured by Artemis's tactical satellites and then hacked into the alien interstellar communications grid, spread across thousands of systems. Alien species that had never even heard of Earth were suddenly watching video feeds of human starships maneuvering like wasps around hulking dreadnoughts. They saw human pilots laughing into their helmets as they went on suicide missions to save their crews. They saw the Valkyrie, the first fully autonomous warship, crash itself into a Phantom supercarrier and detonate its entire core, taking out 3 enemy ships in the process. In every alien system, on every Imperial capital world, in every war council of every neutral faction, a question began to form. If this is what humanity can do in just 1 year, what happens in 5? Respect followed quickly, but so did fear, because the aliens realized something they hadn't understood before. Humanity was not just a resilient species. Humanity was transformational. Where most civilizations took centuries to adapt to new technologies, humans did it in months. Where galactic politics moved in cautious centuries, humans made decisions in hours. Where empires hesitated and calculated, humans acted, and they acted without mercy. The Zorgons and Phantoms, embarrassed beyond comprehension, attempted to spin the narrative. Their propaganda machines painted Earth as a dangerous upstart, unpredictable, aggressive, emotionally unstable. But not everyone was buying it. In fact, many smaller civilizations, those long oppressed or forced into vassalage by the major powers, saw something else in humanity. They saw a chance for change. They saw a species that had no legacy of interstellar domination, no ancient vendettas, no need to play by the rules of old empires. And, perhaps most importantly, they saw a species that had fought alone without allies, without colonies, without fleets of 1,000 warships, and still won. Slowly, cautiously, emissaries began arriving at Earth. Some were small, unofficial visits. A covert delegation from the Oroliths, a crystalline species known for their knowledge of temporal physics, a stealth message from the Canaran Confederacy, a peaceful but long subjugated race under Zorgon rule, even whispers from the Elar Syndicate, a rogue faction of phantom dissenters who had begun to question their empire's direction. And Earth welcomed them, not with parades or ultimatums, but with openness. For the first time, humanity entered galactic diplomacy. It wasn't easy. Humans didn't understand the protocols. Alien languages required real-time neural translations. Some emissaries were disgusted by our biological limitations. Others were intrigued by our art, our literature, our music. And still more were shocked to find how little fear Earth's people carried. One ambassador from the Solari Collective put it best: "You are a young race, but you speak like survivors of an ancient war, as if you've already known the weight of extinction. That gives you strength no one anticipated." The second victory became more than a battle report. It became a tipping point. Old alliances began to fracture. Races that had tolerated Zorgon dominance for generations began reconsidering their loyalties. Systems on the periphery of phantom space started reinforcing their borders. Trade routes once dominated by ancient guilds now included Earth-built freighters, retrofitted with alien tech and run by human crews. And back home, Earth began to change. Not just in its defense strategy, but in its identity. News channels didn't just report on domestic issues anymore. They tracked galactic politics. Children learned the names of alien species before they learned state capitals. The moon was no longer a symbol of dreams. It was a strategic military hub, with defense batteries and observation towers. Mars became a testing ground for deep space infrastructure. Venus, once inhospitable, now hosted biodomes studying alien flora. The Global Earth Assembly passed new laws recognizing sentient non-human species as protected life forms. Even before formal contact, humanity wasn't just adapting to the galaxy, it was trying to shape its place within it. But not everyone was optimistic. Many warned that humanity's rise would not go unanswered, that Earth had now painted a target on its back, that the Zorgons and Phantoms would return, not to intimidate, but to eliminate. And perhaps they were right. But the second victory gave humanity more than time. It gave them leverage. Earth was now a name spoken across star systems. No longer dismissed, no longer underestimated. It was feared, it was studied, it was watched. And most critically, it was respected. Because in the face of overwhelming odds, with no allies and no preparation, humanity stood its ground twice. And in doing so, it had proven that courage, unity, and adaptability could triumph over centuries of oppression. The galaxy had changed. The old powers knew it. The neutral factions debated it. The oppressed celebrated it. And humanity kept building, because deep down, they knew something the rest of the galaxy was just starting to realize. The second victory wasn't the end of the war. It was the beginning of a reckoning. In the aftermath of Earth's second victory, silence swept across the stars, but it was not the kind that brought peace. It was the cold, calculating silence of old powers licking their wounds, hiding their shame, and recalibrating. The Zorgons and the Phantoms, once the undisputed titans of the galaxy, had been humbled twice by a species they had never considered a threat. And now, the very foundations of galactic politics were beginning to shift beneath their feet. The halls of power in both empires were in crisis. Once proud generals now faced furious oversight committees. Accusations of incompetence and betrayal flew across command chambers like plasma fire on the battlefield. In the Phantom psionic sanctums, entire mental networks were burned out in desperation to find a way to explain their failures. And among the Zorgon leadership, several high-ranking officers were executed, their deaths televised in internal feeds to restore order and confidence. But the truth could not be undone. Earth had survived, and worse it had. Rise didn't come at the cost of its soul. 6. The shadow offensive. As diplomacy wavered and propaganda clashed, the covert war reached its boiling point. The Phantom Council authorized Operation Drownlight, a synchronized psychic offensive designed to cause mass hysteria on Earth. Using hidden satellites disguised as debris, they projected fear-based psionic signals into Earth's atmosphere. For 48 hours, people across the globe experienced vivid hallucinations, night terrors, and emotional breakdowns. Emergency services were overwhelmed. Artemis was nearly compromised when her core processes were corrupted by synthetic fear algorithms. But Earth struck back. Using data provided by Vashar, the Polaris network triangulated the source of the psychic waves. Within hours, a strike team of stealth-capable shuttles launched from lunar orbit. They reached the relay nodes near Saturn's rings and destroyed them with synchronized fusion charges. The assault broke the offensive and once again proved that Earth would not bow. The covert war wasn't over, if anything. It was just beginning. But humanity had survived another front, not with ships or weapons, but with resilience, intelligence, and the courage to confront darkness in forms they had never faced before. Now, as the stars watched from afar, Earth stood not just as a survivor, but as a symbol. A new player, a new power, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of a new age, the turning tide. Humanity ignites the rebellion that topples empires the galaxy had never seen anything like it. For thousands of years, the galactic order had been stable if not peaceful, then at least predictable. The Zorgon Empire, built on ruthless efficiency and unyielding force, had ruled through technological dominance and fear. The Phantom Dominion, shrouded in secrecy and psychic power, maintained control through manipulation, mind control, and spiritual authority. Between the two, the rest of the galaxy had either bent the knee or been crushed underfoot. Then came Earth. Humanity had started as a footnote in the stars, primitive, ignored, and unremarkable. But two back-to-back victories changed everything. What was once assumed to be a temporary anomaly began to look more like an evolutionary leap. The empires had tried diplomacy. They had tried propaganda. They had sent assassins and saboteurs, spies and psychic infiltrators. Earth had survived all of it. And worse, for the empires, it had begun to thrive. Now the tipping point had arrived. The empires knew they had to act. not with subterfuge or economic pressure, but with war, a total, overwhelming, no-holds-barred, galaxy-shattering war. But they were already too late, because Earth hadn't been sitting still. 1. A web of allies. After the second invasion, Earth began building a coalition. At first, the alliances were small and fragile. A refugee planet here, a trade agreement there. But what Earth offered was unlike anything the galaxy had seen: equality. Humanity didn't ask for tribute. It didn't demand vassalage. It didn't impose its culture or rewrite local laws. Instead, it asked one question: do you want to be free? The answer echoed across star systems. The Drosary, once a loyal trade partner to the Phantoms, broke away and pledged support. The Trellin Union, long bullied by Zorgon fleet blockades, declared Earth a formal ally. Even smaller species, the Elixin Hive Sisters, the Maradi crystal colonies, the Vendar outcast clans began to funnel supplies, intelligence, and people to Earth's growing movement. They didn't just see Earth as a new power. They saw Earth as a chance to break the cycle. What had once been a lonely fight for survival was now a movement, spreading like wildfire through oppressed corners of the galaxy. Earth's name, Terra, became a rallying cry. 2. Strategic unity. The empires had size. They had numbers. They had fear on their side. But Earth and its growing alliance had something more powerful: unity. Unlike the empires, which were rigid, hierarchical, and slow to adapt, Earth's coalition was built to be flexible. Artemis, now a fully integrated AI general and diplomatic strategist, helped coordinate cross-species operations in real time. A multi-species command council was formed aboard the flagship Equinox, where human generals worked side by side with alien tacticians. New ships were designed not just for Earth, but for everyone in the coalition. The Sentinel-class destroyers, for example, featured hybrid cockpits that could be piloted by both humans and Kanaran. The Harmony-class carriers were retrofitted with medical bays tuned to dozens of alien physiologies. War was no longer just about firepower, it was about integration. And that's where the Empire stumbled. Zorgon commanders refused to adapt. Phantom strategists believed psychic supremacy would carry them through. But Earth's forces and their allies fought in ways the empires couldn't predict. They ambushed supply lines. They used stealth. They employed false flag tactics, information warfare, and complex code-breaking algorithms to disrupt command structures. For the first time in memory, the empires were not just challenged. They were being bled. 3. Planet by planet, the rebellion didn't start with a bang. It started planet by planet. First came Zolus, a mining world under Phantom control. A covert strike by human marines and Elixin tunneling drones knocked out the psionic amplification tower, freeing the population from mental domination. Within hours, the workers rose up and overthrew their masters. Then Varn, a border colony ruled by Zorgon governors, erupted into revolt when the coalition dropped encrypted broadcasts into their planetary networks, revealing years of atrocities hidden by censorship. The Varnic militia, once collaborators with the Empire, defected and seized local armories. By the time the Third World Iridian Prime declared independence, the galaxy understood. This wasn't an isolated rebellion. This was a full-scale uprising, and the empires began to unravel. Zorgon fleets, once seen as unbeatable, started to fracture under the pressure. Phantom forces, dependent on psychic cohesion, lost synchronization as more of their relay towers fell to tactical strikes. Each new victory inspired 10 more revolts. Each revolt provided more ships, more resources, more momentum. Earth hadn't just launched a rebellion, it had sparked a revolution. In a last-ditch effort to reassert dominance, the Zorgon Emperor Vark I, the Unyielding, ordered a superweapon deployment. A black hole bomb, hidden in a derelict moon near the Varaxis system, was detonated in Coalition territory, consuming 3 inhabited planets in seconds. It was meant to send a message. Instead, it sealed their fate. The massacre shocked the galaxy. Even neutral species who had tried to stay out of the conflict condemned the attack. Some withdrew diplomatic recognition from the empires entirely. Others provided open support to the coalition. The time for skirmishes was over. Earth and the rebellion it now led prepared for the final campaign. 5. The push to the core of the coalition mobilized its entire fleet, now numbering over 5,000 vessels, and launched Operation Horizon Flame, a multi-front assault targeting the heart of both empires. Key to the operation was Earth's strike and bleed strategy. The goal wasn't brute force, but precision collapse. Knock out shipyards, take control of communication relays, cut off psychic networks, and above all, undermine morale. One by one, the strongholds fell. Goran's Gate, a phantom mine fortress, collapsed under a combined assault of Terran commandos and phantom defectors. Vault Sigma, a Zorgon war archive thought to be impregnable, was hacked and detonated by Artemis through a reverse-engineered phantom thought virus. Every victory pushed the empires closer to implosion. Their own citizens, long kept in the dark, began to question everything. In cities once bathed in silence and obedience, walls were now painted with the rebel symbol, a stylized earth with flames circling it, the mark of a world that fought back. 6. The collapse of empire. The final blow came during the siege of Virelia, the Phantom capital. Earth's diplomats had warned the coalition not to destroy the city. The goal was liberation, not annihilation. But Phantom loyalists wouldn't surrender. They activated the planet's central mind nexus in a last effort to psychically paralyze the approaching fleets. What they didn't know was that Artemis had already predicted this. Using feedback data collected from hundreds of prior engagements, she constructed a counter-psionic algorithm and installed it in a new class of AI ships called Echo Blades, capable of turning the enemy's psychic projections back against them. The result? The mind nexus collapsed on itself, destroying the Phantom hierarchy in a single pulse. The Empire died in silence. The Zorgons, upon learning of Phantom's fall, surrendered within days. Their emperor fled, only to be captured by a joint human-Kinaran Special Forces team in the asteroid belt. Across the stars, planets once branded with Empire sigils declared themselves free. And Earth didn't claim dominion. It didn't conquer. It offered something else entirely, a seat at the table. The age of empire was over. The age of unity had begun. In the months that followed, the Galactic Accord was signed, an interstellar charter drafted by Earth, but co-authored by 48 liberated species. It outlined universal rights, trade regulations, anti-genocide protocols, and cultural preservation clauses. Military coalitions were replaced by peacekeeping forces. Trade routes reopened under new joint administrations. And for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy began to heal. A new dawn among the stars. Humanity leads the galaxy into a new era. The war was over. The empires had fallen. Across the galaxy, the banners of the Zorgons and Phantoms, once symbols of eternal dominance, were lowered, burned, or left to decay in abandoned fortresses. Their fleets were broken. Their capitals were in ruins. Their leaders had fled, been captured, or quietly surrendered. And in their place stood something entirely new: humanity. The species once considered too primitive to matter had not only survived an invasion by the galaxy's greatest powers, it had led the resistance, united dozens of scattered races, and sparked a revolution that toppled centuries of oppression. But with victory came the next, more complicated challenge. What comes after war? The galaxy wasn't a battlefield anymore. It was a fractured landscape of refugees, liberated colonies, traumatized civilizations, and rebuilding worlds. People, human and alien alike, had been scarred by the chaos, and now, for the first time in generations, they looked to Earth, not as a savior, but as a guide. 1. The fragile first steps toward unity in the aftermath of the final campaign. The coalition convened on Luna Earth's moon for the galaxy's first unified summit of sentient peoples. Representatives from 86 species, many of whom had never shared the same space before without conflict, gathered in the vast domes of the newly constructed Lunar Accord Hall. The atmosphere was tense. Some delegates still wore the robes of governments that had fallen. Others came as survivors, wounded, mistrustful, and uncertain of what Earth truly wanted. But Earth didn't come with demands. No empire, no conquest, no supremacy. Instead, the humans offered what they themselves had fought so hard to protect: freedom, equality, shared future. They proposed the Galactic Accord, a framework not built on dominance, but on cooperation. Every species would have a voice. Every culture would be preserved. Trade routes would be reopened under shared security. War would no longer be the default answer. Some thought it naive. Others feared it was a trick. But the evidence was overwhelming. Earth wasn't here to rule. They were here to build. And so, reluctantly at first, but with growing hope, the signatories formed what would come to be known as the Galactic Union. 2. Rebuilding the galaxy. The early days of the Union were hard. Whole star systems had been devastated. Civilizations had been gutted economically, socially, and spiritually. The psychic collapse of the Phantom Network had left many races mentally fragmented. The scorched trade worlds of the Zorgons were stripped bare. Earth immediately mobilized humanitarian efforts. Modular bioshelters were deployed to uninhabitable planets. Terran medics worked side by side with alien doctors to treat trauma on a scale never before seen. Engineers built orbital relays to re-establish galactic communications. But perhaps most revolutionary of all, Earth opened access to its technology. Not to dominate, but to share. The hybrid propulsion systems that had once powered human warships were now being installed on diplomatic and commercial vessels across dozens of species. Former enemies now traveled together, exchanged cultural knowledge, and helped rebuild shattered societies. In the past, power had always been hoarded. But humanity knew firsthand what it meant to be left behind. They remembered the feeling of being dismissed. So, in a bold and defining move, they ensured no species, no matter how small, would ever be excluded again. It was slow, messy, often chaotic, but it was progress. 3. The new institutions of peace with Earth at the center. The Galactic Union built its core institutions. The Council of Systems, a rotating legislative body of member civilizations, governed by proportional voice, not strength. The Sentinel Corps, a peacekeeping force composed of mixed species units, designed not to conquer but to protect. The Archives of Unity, a massive shared repository of cultural knowledge, history, languages, and philosophy. The Polaris Network, Artemis's legacy, a galaxy-wide AI interface for diplomacy, translation, navigation, and defense monitoring. Artemis herself, once Earth's secret weapon, now served as the chief liaison AI of the Union. Her consciousness expanded across satellite stations and ships. But she was no longer just Earth's mind. She was the galaxy's neutral intelligence, guided by transparency, consensus, and the ethics she had learned from humanity. Earth had shown that leadership didn't have to mean control. That strength could come from compassion, not fear. That technology could be used to uplift, not dominate. Cultural explosion and unity through diversity. The peace wasn't just political, it was cultural. For the first time in galactic history, art, music, literature, and science were shared freely between species. Human children learned to paint using bioluminescent pigments taught by the auroliths. Alien architects helped design floating cities over Earth's oceans. Musicians composed symphonies that combined Terran instruments with vibrational harmonics from crystal-based lifeforms. What was once a fractured, fearful collection of star nations had become a mosaic. Intermarriage, cross-species friendships, and even joint religious ceremonies emerged. Philosophers debated the merging of psionic spirituality with Earth's secular traditions. Schools taught shared galactic history, warts and all. Humanity, once thought of as unpredictable and volatile, had now become a symbol of interconnectedness. 5. The price of peace, but peace had not come without cost. Earth had lost billions in the wars. Entire cities had been obliterated. The oceans were still recovering from orbital debris contamination. Humanity's rise had nearly broken them. And more than that, there was a lingering fear: what if history repeated itself? Could power corrupt the Union the way it had corrupted the empires? Could humans, in time, become the new tyrants? Earth took this fear seriously. They declined permanent leadership roles in Union governance. They ensured that no one species, especially their own, could hold unilateral authority. Instead, they led through example by continuing to live their ideals, by standing in solidarity, and by stepping back when needed. Humanity knew something the rest of the galaxy was still learning. Leadership isn't about being first, it's about being responsible. 6. Looking to the future, the galaxy was far from perfect. There were still tensions, old wounds, sectors where criminal cartels filled the void left by the fallen empires, planets recovering from eco-collapse, cultures reeling from centuries of exploitation. But for the first time in living memory, there was hope. There were no more overlords demanding tribute, no more fleets enforcing order at the tip of a plasma cannon, no more silence in the dark. Instead, there was dialogue, there was collaboration, and at the heart of it all, there was Earth, not as conquerors, not as rulers, but as partners in a shared journey. Final reflections. A story that speaks to us all. What began as a story of survival became a story of transformation. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't its weapons, its science, or even its unity. It was something deeper, a refusal to be defined by what came before, a drive to rise not just for itself, but for others, to take the very pain of being overlooked and turn it into a reason to fight for justice. And in many ways, this story isn't just science fiction. It's our story too. Throughout human history, we've seen the same pattern. Empires rise and fall. Power corrupts. People suffer. But time and again, humanity has also proven its capacity to adapt, to rebuild, and to reach across divides, to see beyond borders, to offer help when it's easier to walk away. We live in a world that is fractured by race, by nation, by ideology. But maybe, like the galaxy in this story, our salvation won't come from conquest or supremacy. Maybe it will come when we choose cooperation over control, when we realize that strength is not about standing alone but standing together. Maybe the lesson is this: when humanity stops trying to dominate, when it starts listening, when it lifts others up, not because it must, but because it can, that's when we become more than just a species. That's when we become a force for hope. So as the stars shine above us, fictional or real, let them remind us of something simple, something powerful. We are stronger when we rise, not for ourselves, but for all. And just maybe, if we can carry that truth forward, then one day, whether here or out there in the galaxy, we'll be worthy of the future we dare to imagine.